Those close to President Ruto suddenly start talking about tribalism, dividing Kenyans along tribal lines. And virtually all those who are close to Ruto are parroting the same language, tribalism. Don't divide Kenyans along tribal lines. And meanwhile, according to those who are very short-sighted politically, Rigathi Gachagua attends several functions with Ruto and gives speeches where he's praising Ruto. But meanwhile, Bwana Gachagua's allies are talking a very different story. And mainly the narrative is based on the suffering in the Mount Kenya region because of policies of the current regime. But according to the shallow and the short-sighted, things are okay. At least Ruto and Gachagua are talking. Deputy President Gachagua is still praising his boss, William Samoei Ruto. But a deeper look into this politics will reveal something very different. Actually, in a nutshell, Ruto and UDA are cornered politically. Many don't believe that. Many don't want to believe that. And I'm talking about both sides of the political divide. But I'm going to break down what is unfolding in Kenyan politics currently, until those who want to see will clearly see what is actually happening. But before that, let us take a quick trip down south to a country called South Africa. Now this one is important because, in my opinion, what is unfolding in South Africa, unprecedented, is coming to Kenya next. Very, very soon. You know, in politics, the most valuable skill any politician can have is to see the future. And by the way, here I'm talking about the immediate future. Now, when you're able to see the future, including the immediate future, you're then able to position yourself as a politician and prepare ahead of time for what is coming. Obviously, you're going to have an advantage, a huge one, as opposed to all those other politicians who don't have your skills, who will have to play catch-up in a game which is usually very fast-paced. That's politics. And so, what is this that has happened in South Africa that is coming to our shores very, very soon? In a nutshell, a coalition government, not a coalition before an election. There is a very, very different animal called a coalition of survival after an election. That is what we are talking about in South Africa. And personally, I can't wait to see how powerful forces will respond to this development. You know, there are people who always must have control, especially over the continent of Africa. How are they going to handle this one? Anyway, more about that towards the tail end of my show today. Now, incidentally, former President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta is in South Africa. He has been involved in those elections as the head of the AU delegation observing those landmark elections. And to the spiritual, that is a sign. One of the most popular politicians currently in Kenya, being there on the ground as something extraordinary, unprecedented, takes place. Now, this one may be a little difficult for younger Kenyans to grasp, but for those of us who were around and glued to our TV sets on February 1990, when Nelson Mandela walked out of incarceration after 27 long years. An old man. Those of us who were there, staring into our screens, not wanting to believe what was happening, will very quickly understand the domination of the ANC, African National Congress, on South African politics since the end of apartheid. That was the legal racial system in that country that greatly disadvantaged the majority black natives. Or shall I say that the South African way? Black natives. For decades, the name Mandela remained synonymous with the ANC. In other words, whenever South Africans went to the polls and received a ballot paper, all they could see was Legend Mandela. But today, after a few dramatic defections from the ANC, a much more aware electorate, many more younger educated South Africans, who do not even want to start to understand that Mandela is the only one-term president, voluntary one-term president, the entire continent of Africa has ever seen. All these factors have resulted into the situation today where the ANC has lost its majority in parliament. Now, why is that such a big deal? Well, according to the South African Constitution, there is no direct vote for the president. The president is actually elected by elected leaders. And so in the past, with a vast majority of ANC in parliament, it was very easy to predict who will be elected president. But now, that is no longer the case. Especially in the current situation, where there's so much animosity against the leader of the ANC, the immediate former president, Bwana Ramaphosa. So much venom against him that some parties are saying, we will talk to the ANC, but not the ANC of that man, Yule Mtu. And therefore this could force a situation where the immediate former president may have to either resign so that somebody else takes over as party leader, and negotiations with the other parties that may want to form a coalition would be much easier. Or these negotiations could go ahead and some of those other parties would say, we don't have a deal as long as that man is president. However, if our man is president, then we have a deal. Of course, that man becoming president, hailing from another political party other than the ANC. But believe it or not, this is not the big worry of many huge South African businesses. No! What is giving them sleepless nights is the entry of radical black politics into government. Those other parties that will form a coalition with the ANC will have their demands. Now, the reason why all these developments should be of great interest to Kenyans is because if there were free, fair, verifiable elections in Kenya today, devoid of any tribalism, that is exactly the kind of government we would end up with in Kenya. Indeed, in case you didn't know, the crafters of our 2010 Constitution anticipated, desired exactly that kind of scenario, which of course would also drastically reduce the powers of the presidency. Because as an elected member of parliament, belonging to the same party as the party of the president, You would not be a stooge of the presidency. Rather, you would be a servant of your constituents, the ones who elected you. And you'd be able to stand up to the president and tell them, Your Excellency, I support you, but those taxes my poverty-stricken constituents cannot pay, and therefore I cannot support this finance bill. I'm sorry, I can't. Instead of having the current very disgusting situation where members of parliament are waiting for instructions from State House. You see the way our political system is set up, borrowing a lot from the Americans. You're not supposed to have an opposition. The opposition is parliament, opposition to the presidency. And in that kind of situation, you will tend to have the leader of the majority and the leader of the minority working very closely together, more often than not, working together to defeat a bill from State House. And that is why those who understand our 2010 Constitution but have not been following our politics will be shocked when they hear analysts in Kenya talking about an opposition. Which opposition? And so what went wrong? Very simple. Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, William Samoei Ruto, in conjunction with Kibaki's deep state, rigged the 2013 elections so that the president would have a majority in parliament and continue to use that majority in parliament to have their way. In other words, we forced a different system than what our constitution envisaged. But fortunately, it is very easy to correct. Very easy. Easier than you ever imagined. All that we have to do is to remove tribalism from our politics and have a free and fair election right across the board. And in that kind of scenario, for instance, you would have a number of legislators from the weed professor's party, Wajakoya's party, and one day you would need them to pass a crucial bill, and they would say, we're going to support you, but the deal is you also support our bill to legalize weed. After all, the majority of the voters are for it. And then some older Kenyans, about my age and much older, would say, no, please let's go back to the old system. We can't handle this. Well, I have some news for you. That is precisely what is coming to Kenya very shortly. Remember that Kenyan voters have just been taught a lesson they will never forget. Many Kenyans who supported the rigging of 2013 and 2017 because their side won will never do that again. Wameshika adabu na bado. Now, back to why Ruto and UDA are cornered. This year's Madaraka Day celebrations were held in far away from Nairobi, Bungoma County, at the Masinde Muliro Stadium. By the way, Bungoma is where my late mother hailed from. My roots in that part of the country are very deep, biologically speaking. Anyway, the fact that so many dignitaries missed this National Day celebration, in my opinion, is very significant. Because the same characters attended similar national celebrations in other faraway parts of the country. Of our current political situation, full of uncertainties, although one certainty is that things cannot remain the same for much longer. The UDA ship is sinking. That is a certainty. But there are so many other uncertainties. Friends, kumedhuka. Even foreign dignitaries, many of them, gave the event a miss. Even neighboring presidents were not in attendance. That should tell you a lot. Very simply put, many of these powerful people are reading the political situation in Kenya and saying, attending is not going to add any ugali into my sufuria, and therefore I will miss it and nothing will happen. I should be busy preparing for what is coming. And if you're a local dignitary, you will say, I should be busy preparing on how to survive, because change is coming. In case you didn't know, many people attend these national days because they know they will get a chance to speak to so and so about this pressing issue that they need sorted out. And so, in other words, the verdict is, even if I go, I can never get anything done, anything sorted out. Where this country has reached, I know I can't, so why waste my time? And one of the biggest looming crises in all this is the Ruto-Gachagua war. And the latest is that UDA are saying, we don't want tribalism. The tribalism that almost finished Kenya in December 2007, January 2008. They are saying, we don't want the politics of this tribe versus those tribes. They don't want that in Kenya. Now, that is a very strange statement coming from UDA. Because I'm going to ask you a simple question. Most public appointments to important and lucrative positions have hailed from which tribe? Just answer that simple question. And you'll realize that the UDA government is already a government practicing tribalism. But they're telling Kenyans, get away from tribalism. Now, how does that one work? Is there any logic there? And please don't get me wrong, I'm not supporting tribalism. Although in my opinion, tribalism is already finished in the country called Kenya. It's just a matter of time. It is a political idea that has failed the test of time. In my opinion, and I know this is going to be very controversial, in my opinion, Mount Kenya leaders coming together to speak for their region is not tribalism. It is the failure of elected leaders. It is the incompetence of leaders who elected to parliament to serve our interests, but who are now serving their own interests and the interests of State House. That is really what it is. It's not tribalism. Because many of the things being fought for are unique to that particular region. Most of us do not have the same problem. We have other problems. We don't have a one man, one shilling, one vote problem. Granted, some of us do. But if Mount Kenya wins, we will definitely enjoy the fruits of their victory. Because when they win, not if they win, when they win, the benefits will be spread right across the board. And in case you didn't know, nobody will lose, even those areas with low population, because we have something called the Equalization Fund, which has never been implemented. And the simple reason is that Wakubwa want more money to eat. They want to maximize the amount of money that will end up in their pockets and in foreign accounts, offshore accounts. And so what the smart Kenyans are doing is fully backing Limuru 3 and the Mount Kenya region. But of course it is a different story for emotional Kenyans. Anyway, the big point here is that this response from Ruto, UDA and company, appealing to Kenyans to shun tribalism, and yet their government is a tribal government. This is a response to the Rigathi-Gachagua rebellion, of course, as well as Limuru 3, which means those two are a real threat. Because these powerful people cannot waste their time even thinking about something that is not a threat. And therefore this should tell us very clearly that Rigathi Gachagua and the aftermath of Limuru 3 are a real threat to Ruto and UDA. This should be a very clear confirmation. But in all this chaos, have you ever asked yourself a simple question as follows? Why are Ruto, UDA and company still so confident, still not seeing that they are cornered, even as the people of Kenya continue to rise up in all forms? Actually, the answer is very simple. Their confidence comes from the very strong support they're receiving from powerful Western powers who are invested in the same interests as these Wakubwa have. It is not in their best interests to have powerful counties. 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote is not a good thing for them. The developments in South Africa, those are a nightmare to them. Proper implementation of the 2010 Constitution, that is a threat to them. Why? Well, logically, it is much easier to deal with one powerful individual than to deal with many, many different interests. You may still get a few things done if you're lucky, but it is a nightmare in comparison to the very simple current situation where you just have one person to talk to, one person to please, one person to give money. When you understand this, then analyzing Kenyan politics becomes very easy. There is no need for complicated arithmetic. Oh, in 2027, Gachagua will go with Raila. Oh, in 2027, this and this will happen. No need for all those strange calculations. And this is precisely why my very latest special report on the terrible secrets of Uncle Sam in the country called Kenya is very key, very important for anybody who wants to totally understand, as well as get hold of a lot of secrets. Because we have even had very top officials right at the top who are actually foreign agents. And some of them have pretended and fooled Kenyans into believing that their first priority is the well-being of Kenyans. And if you go for that very latest special report about the terrible secrets of Uncle Sam, you'll also get all the other previous highly sensitive special reports for free. And the information we're talking about here will make your ears ring, including details behind the General Ogolla assassination. Now you can see details on your screens right now. For only Kenya shillings 4,999 or $38, you can have all these valuable special reports in your inbox in seconds. Please remember to text me your email address immediately after payment. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.